And welcome to another edition of Niners Nightly. I'm Larry Krueger on the KNBR YouTube channel. Hope everybody's having a fantastic September the 25th as we come to you at 6 o'clock, and we've got a great hour of Niner football to discuss here on KNBR's YouTube channel. It's going to be a fantastic hour, and we welcome all of you guys to KNBR's YouTube channel. And of course, like and subscribe. With always the good behavior on YouTube is to like and subscribe. If you like, it just helps the algorithm. More people find the stream, and if you hit subscribe every time KNBR goes live, you click that notification bell. You'll get a little ding on your phone saying, "Don't miss a minute of KNBR's action on KNBR's YouTube channel." So welcome to Niners Nightly. And we do have a good hour for you. Later on this hour, in about 15 minutes, Christopher Price is going to join us. He's a great follow on X at C Price Globe. He writes for the Boston Globe. He's been covering the Patriots for 20 years. He hosts the Patriots Believe Network show. And we'll check in on the Patriots. We've been talking. It's, now here we are finally on a Wednesday. We got enough time to kind of digest the loss to the Rams, look at the 1-2 record, and kind of look ahead to this weekend, and the Patriots roll in Sunday. So we'll start looking at that matchup with Christopher Price, and I'm really looking forward to talking to Chris. We talked to him earlier today. Now, as far as what else are we doing this hour, I want to get into Brandon Ayuk and just, what is going on with Ayuk, because it seems to be a little bit of a dispute whether or not this guy's getting separation or not. You heard some of the writers throw to Shanahan today the stat that Brandon Ayuk is number one in wide receiver separation. Wide receiver separation. So, and he's number one on separation win rate in the NFL for the game that he had this last week. He had a 46.9% separation win rate, which is the best separation rate of any receiver in football in an individual game this year. And that was in this last game. That was for his week 3 performance against the Rams. But then, if you look at some of the other numbers, his separation per target when targeted through 3 games is the 3rd worst in the NFL. And when he was asked today at his locker about, hey, Brandon, you're number one in the NFL separation win rate, he didn't seem like he even believed it. Like he was like, he didn't want to comment. I mean, you could tell. He knows that he doesn't look like the player he was last year. He knows that he doesn't look nearly as fast or nearly as explosive or nearly as in good a shape as he was last year. He's not the player this year that he was last year. And there's many, many, many numbers that we can point to that demonstrate exactly that. But this one was interesting because he is number one in separation win rate for week 3, but he also has got the 3rd worst separation per target when targeted through 3 weeks in the entire league. So is he getting separation or not? When he was asked to, talk about it today, he's like, you could tell he didn't believe that he has the best separation win rate because that's not what he's experiencing out on the field for the most part. It's funny because Shanahan was asked about it. He also was hesitant to comment and then was like, well, yeah, he looks like he's separating like he always has. And, so there's a little bit of a discrepancy. Either you believe in separation win rate and you say, man, in the Ram game, Ayuk separated better than any receiver has all year in 3 weeks, or you could be the other person looking at his separation per target over the 3-week run of the season so far and say that's 3rd worst in the NFL. He's not getting the kind of separation. Anyway, we'll get into that. We'll get into that in a bit. But I want to talk off the start a little bit, and we'll get into some of the 49ers issues. I thought some of the most interesting soundbite of the day was Mike Silver, who covers the Niners for the Chronicle. And he went on one of Barstool's shows. And I'm going to let you listen to this. This is pretty interesting stuff. This is Silver talking to Barstool about Mike Shanahan. So now you can see it. Here it is.
There is something at 49er headquarters referred to as the Shanacam, which basically means Mike Shanahan needs to watch meetings and practice ASAP virtually.
That's awesome.
So some people think he's the shadow GM. I spent a bunch of time with him in May and June of 2022. And so in those conversations, I would ask about Trey Lance, of course, and Jimmy, and he kept talking about Brock Purdy because he'd seen some minicamp tape. And I was like, God, he's kind of weirdly into Brock Purdy, but whatever. He's the 262nd pick. Now they open against the Bears. It's Trey Lance's first game as the unquestioned starter. The day before, I go to Mike Shanahan's room, and I'm sitting up there, and I'm asking him about Trey Lance, and he again brings up Purdy, and he says, when you have a guy like that in your building, you don't let him out. And I'm like, are we talking about, thinking, and, so he's still got it.
Yeah, this is why I'm saying, like, how is he not, like, Brock Purdy is a guy who it took him going to a Super Bowl for everyone to be like, okay, maybe he's actually really good. Yeah. And Mike Shanahan, before he even takes a snap, the NFL is like, this guy is going to be good.
There is something.
So I thought that was really interesting on a lot of fronts. Let's talk about it for a second. One, Mike Shanahan saw the greatness in Purdy going back to his rookie year minicamp. And that makes me feel good because I also watched that minicamp and also thought, man, Brock Purdy looks amazing, and started talking about it right then and there. But just also the fact that, Mike Shanahan is got, it's one thing if you're old, retired, and you lost your sharp, you lost your fastball. You can kind of tell when Mike Shanahan talks that he's hasn't lost anything. He's sharp. He's really sharp. The last time the 49ers actually won a Super Bowl, he was calling the plays, and he did it in dominant fashion. And obviously we all know what happened that night with Steve Young and the Chargers and how the Niners dominated. But Mike Shanahan saw the greatness in Brock Purdy early on. And even when, Trey Lance is 24 hours away from making his first start, he's got Purdy on the brain. Now, why? Because they had just protected Purdy and cut Sudfeld, and they had guaranteed Sudfeld $3 million of Jed's money. So I'm sure that was kind of an awkward conversation. But at the same time, it's like Mike Shanahan had that on the brain. Hey, you can't let a guy this talented get out of your building. And that's how the Niners felt about it. And they ate that $3 million. Could you imagine if John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan decided they didn't want to go to Jed and didn't want to ask Jed to eat the Sudfeld $3 million, and they just went with Sudfeld and cut Brock Purdy? And now Brock Purdy, Trey Lance then goes and falls on his face. And Jimmy obviously got hurt when he came back. Could you imagine if right now the 49ers had drafted Brock Purdy as Mr. Irrelevant, only to cut him to save $3 million of Jed's money? Which you got to think there was at least some possibility of that happening. And now Brock Purdy at this point would have probably emerged on somebody else's team. Could you imagine? Not just the people talk about, oh man, Brock Purdy saved Shanahan's bacon. Oh, he saved John Lynch's bacon. By the way, happy birthday, John Lynch. September 25th, 2024. Happy birthday to Giant Niners general manager John Lynch. But could you imagine in reality, if it had gone the way it went, which is the Niners drafted Brock Purdy, but for whatever reason, didn't have the conviction, didn't have maybe Mike Shanahan looking at him in preseason, didn't have the conviction that Brock was going to be special, and you subjected Brock to waivers and he got picked off waivers and now is on another team's practice squad or roster. It wouldn't be practice squad, it'd be roster. That you want to dial up the heat. That would have dialed up the heat on this regime in a way that would have just been unbelievable. You drafted Trey Lance. He's not the guy. You drafted a franchise quarterback in Brock Purdy only to waive him to save $3 million for Nate Sudfeld because you had $3 million guaranteed to Nate Sudfeld. And now Brock Purdy was somewhere else doing exactly somewhere else what he's doing here. Shanahan and Lynch would be in a much different space right now if that were the case. That, I mean, we talk about the Shanahan, we talk about the Purdy draft choice, we talk about missing on Trey Lance, but what if they had missed on Trey Lance and coughed up Brock Purdy for nothing and watched him succeed somewhere else? That would have been a brutal thing for this regime. All right, so what happened today in Santa Clara? Let's get into it. There was a number of things. One, that I thought that was really interesting. Just when I saw that this morning, that Silver went on with Barstool and basically told that story about Shanahan. And it also makes you wonder if he's right. Is Mike Shanahan, some way kind of a shadow GM? I've asked Kyle many times, hey, what does Pops do? And he's like, well, he doesn't do anything, but he does everything. It's like one of those answers. He doesn't officially do anything, but he does whatever he wants, kind of a thing. Let's be honest. Mike Shanahan's a football genius, offensive genius. I think it's proven. He probably has some football passion. I guarantee you, if he's anything like me, he loves his kids and is most passionate about seeing his kids do well. In this case, Kyle win a Super Bowl. So I think that's probably his football, wish left unfulfilled is probably Kyle winning a bowl. So he's very invested. He doesn't want to be a coach himself because of the time. He doesn't want to be a GM himself right now because of the time, but he's still very capable. So he shows up in camp and he may be the de facto, GM. He's got Kyle's ear, and he's got football opinions on everything from Brock to, backup quarterbacks to, Ayuk to contracts to, you name it. Mike Shanahan, has got a bunch of opinions. And I just think what he actually does and what's his exact role, we're never going to get the real answer, but he obviously has a role here with the Niners. A couple other things today. The Niners signed Shaquille Brown to their practice squad. He signed originally with them in middle of May. They released him at the cutdown. He was with Jim Washburn in Tennessee. Washburn and Krueger are really close. Now that Javon Hargrave is going on the IR, that means T.Y. McGill most likely is going to get called up from the practice squad to the active roster Sunday against the Patriots. And that means the Niners have a spot on their practice squad probably for one more defensive tackle. And Shaquille Brown is interesting. Big, powerful, 295 pounds, pretty quick, pretty athletic. He didn't have a great preseason, but looked really good at different times in camp. As I said, I think you're going to see T.Y. McGill get the elevation on Saturday to the active roster, and I think Brown will replace him. Interesting name. Now, Shaquille Brown and Evan Anderson would be the two practice squad defensive tackles. A lot of people have been asking me, man, the Niners are off to a slow start. What are their odds? What does that say about their playoff odds? So I wanted to look that up today, and I did look that up for you guys. If you start 1-2, you have a 25.9% chance of making the playoffs. And based on the history on it, only an 11.9% chance of making it beyond the wild card round. So, the Niners have less than a 15% chance, less than a 12% chance of making it out of the wild card round. And by the way, no team has ever won the NFC title game or the AFC title game. And obviously neither is, if you don't win those, you don't win the Super Bowl. Nobody's ever won the Super Bowl. Nobody's ever won a conference title game after a 1-2 start. So take that for what it's worth. All right, let's do this. Let's welcome in our guest tonight, which is Chris Price, and 20th season on the Pats beat. He hosts the Believe Network podcast of the Pats show. The Believe Network show on the Patriots is hosted by Chris, and he is with us here on YouTube. Chris, how are you? Thanks for a few minutes.
I'm doing great, Larry. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing better than the Niners are doing right now. I'm feeling healthy. I'm feeling good. The Niners, not so much. But really, the Patriots don't want to hear about it.
Yeah, that's true. You're not going to get any sympathy here in New England from a Patriots team that just really got beaten pretty soundly by the Jets Thursday night. I know we talked a little bit off the air about the Patriots making the most of the extra couple of days and kind of getting a chance to heal up a little bit. But I honestly don't know how much of a difference it's going to make with a team that's really struggled to protect the quarterback over the first 3 games. Jacoby Brissett has taken a real beating. He was hit, I think it was 10 times against the Jets, sacked 5 times, And so that is really the Achilles heel for this Patriots team over the first 3 games of the season. They're pretty competitive on the defensive side of the ball, but the offense just can't get anything going in the passing game because of a lack of pass protection.
Well, people hear Patriots, and this is Tom Brady country here. So there's a lot of people that, associate Tom with them and Belichick with them, and what an incredible run they had together there. And obviously Tom left, and now Belichick gets shown the door or left. I mean, how was the departure kind of termed up there? We know he's one of the great coaches of all time, but did Kraft fire him? Was it mutual? Did he step down? What's the official, what's the official, word, and also what's kind of the truth?
Well, it's interesting because we've seen a couple of different versions of the truth over the course of the last few months, particularly, with the dynasty, the thing on Apple Plus, and that came off as very, positive. It painted the ownership in a very good light, painted the coach in a very bad light. I do think there was a bit of a rapprochement with Tom Brady night here in June, where they kind of had a chance to tie a bow on things a little bit. And it was one kind of, it was Brady's night, but it was a chance for Belichick to say goodbye to the fans. They gave him a big standing ovation. I guess ultimately it's a little bit of everything, but let's be honest here, man, the Krafts were the ones who had to kind of turn their keys. So, they own the building, they own the team. So I think if Bill had his druthers, he'd be here. Particularly because he wants to break Don Shula's record, or wanted to break Don Shula's all-time wins record. So I guess you could ultimately call it a firing, but I think they're starting to kind of head in the right direction. Not the right direction, but they're starting to head in a positive direction, at least when it comes to their relationship. There's going to be a statue of Tom outside the stadium sooner rather than later. And look, it's my opinion too. We're going to get one of those Green Bay deals where we're going to see a statue of the quarterback. We're going to see a statue of the coach eventually. We're going to see a statue of the owner. So they're working to create a positive relationship, even in the wake of everything that's happened here over the last 6, 7, 8 months.
I told myself I didn't want to get into this tonight with you, but it's like, it was such an impactful thing when I watched it. I was just like, whoa, the Brady roast. What did you think of the Brady roast? I mean, that thing, I could not look away, but at the same time, it was like, I really didn't want to watch it. It was, how would you describe the Brady roast? It was a true roast, very uncomfortable, but why? I mean,
this is why most roasts don't go 3 hours, or most roasts aren't broadcast live. You could have cut the fat out of it and maybe gotten down to an hour and a half, maybe an hour, really good stuff. It was wonderfully awkward, from them taking digs at the coach to taking digs at Gronk and Brady. And it was fun. And that also kind of played a bit of a role in repairing any hurt feelings. I think everyone, we're starting to see more and more stuff like that. Like Brady and Belichick are doing that podcast together with Jim Gray. And it's all kind of starting to, all the wounds are kind of starting to heal. But yeah, that roast was a little bit awkward, wasn't it? It was really awkward to watch.
It was painful.
It was fun, but it was a little painful. Awkward.
Yeah. I mean, some of it, there were some great moments, but there was also some moments I was like, I can't believe I'm watching this. And I kept looking around going, the kids aren't in the room, right? I mean, it really was rough. Okay. Anytime you move from a dynasty and a head coach like Belichick and a quarterback like Brady to the next regime in a media firestorm market like Boston, there's going to be all kinds of stories and blame and this and that. Who's under the gun here? Who's feeling the pressure? Is it Mayo? Is it May, the quarterback? Is it Brissett? Is it Kraft? Has he now brought this all on himself? Who's suddenly has dialed up the heat on themselves here?
Kraft, the ownership group, because at least the perception is right now they pushed Bill out. They pushed the greatest coach of all time out. They pushed the greatest quarterback of all time out, and they got nothing in return. There is a feeling that Gerard Mayo was going to be the next guy. It was either going to be him or Mike Vrabel, really, according to a lot of people, which kind of makes sense. Kind of both guys who kind of came of age as players under Bill and know the system and know the kind of quote unquote Patriot way. They understand how things are done around Foxborough. But if you're looking for someone who is really feeling the heat, it's the Kraft family and Robert, because Yeah, even after the opening win, and that was great, and there was good feeling there for a week, they're 1-2. They're staring down the barrel of an angry 49ers team. They're looking at this as a get-right game, I'm assuming. And the expectations are different around this team. I mean, you guys went through it in San Francisco for, on a number of occasions here. This is, for years and years, it was, the conference championship was the floor, when it came to the overall level of expectation. And for almost 18, 20 years, that was the feeling in New England. And now you have to kind of hit the reset button and say, all right, well, if they win 6 games, you feel good about where you are as long as you're ascending. The goal here for this team, there was a Patriots team in 1993 that lost 11 of its first 12. Drew Bledsoe, rookie year, Bill Parcells, the quarterback, but they were getting better over the course of the season. And by the time December came around, they were a pain in the ass to play. They won their last 4 games. They were clearly on the upswing. That's what you want to see here if you're a New England fan. You want to see them just get better over the course of the season. When they get to November and December, whoever they play, they're going to be a tough out for anyone. And then you look to 2025, they have 4 picks in the top 100. They're going to have gobs of cap space. And theoretically, you're going to have a young quarterback who's ascending. So this year is all about kind of, I look at this, Larry, I honestly look at this as like an oil tanker, where it's like, you're not going to turn it around immediately. It's going to take a couple of years. So this is the year where you're going to take your lumps. You're going to finish 5-12, 6-11, maybe best possible scenario. And then you go out and you get those difference makers in free agency in the draft next year.
One of the great personnel guys. I'm a former scout, so I always look at the personnel side of things, right? I scouted with the Cardinals before that in the Canadian League. One of the great personnel guys I've ever met was a friend of a friend, and that's Ron Wolf. And Ron Wolf's kid, Elliot Wolf, is the general manager there in New England. Is he have total control? I mean, what we're seeing now, is this the Elliot Wolf vision, or is there so many different power positions in that organization that he's at the top of the masthead but doesn't have all the control? Does he run? Is this his show?
They're still kind of sorting things out, but he has the most power. I'll say this, in the organization. It was weird when Bill left. Obviously, he was, he ran everything. And so there was a bit of a power void there. So it was like, well, okay, we know Mayo's going to coach. Who's going to serve as GM? Who's going to serve as, head of college scouting? Who's going to do this? And they've kind of slotted some people in. Matt Groh is a holdover. But yet, Elliott is the closest thing this team has to a general manager at this point. And he's feeling a little bit of the heat himself, particularly in the wake of the Matt Judon trade. But he's earned himself some pretty good, some decent goodwill in the locker room on a few levels, because he's handed out a bunch of contracts. He handed out a bunch of contracts this past offseason to guys who are foundational elements of the team the last 2, 3, 4 years. Guys like Mike Onwenu, Ramondre Stevenson, Hunter Henry, Jabril Peppers. All of those guys got big deals in the offseason. Kyle Duggar, who was just named a captain after Bentley went down. So he's earned himself some goodwill in the locker room. But again, they need more pieces if they're going to be competitive. We like to think that May is going to be the answer eventually, quarterback, but they still don't have that number 1 receiver. They flirted with Brandon Ayuk for a little bit. Calvin Ridley, they made a run at him. And they're lacking a classic left tackle. So if Elliot Wolf wants to continue building this thing, wants to continue stacking some level of success, that any kind of success that he has this year, those are the 2 bodies that he needs to get this offseason. A number 1, no doubt, left tackle you could put out there for the next dozen years and not worry about him, and then a big wide receiver. And so you kind of go from there. But ultimately, I guess to answer your question, this is Elliott's team, and he has started to put his stamp on it.
Let's talk about both sides of the ball. We'll start on the offense. Alex Van Pelt's the OC. Brissett's the starting quarterback. Drake May's the future. You got the big running back, Stevenson. Antonio Gibson comes over from Washington. Excellent receiving back. Mm-hmm. And I could see them trying to get him ISO'd on Devondre Campbell. Campbell's really struggling to defend the pass. But then I saw some, I know there's injuries on this offensive line. I love Demario Douglas. I think, I loved him at Liberty. Little receiver, but tons of heart. And I guess my question would be about the offensive line. I heard Baldy, touting Caden Wallace out of Penn State and Layden Robinson just a couple weeks ago in a video. But, You're saying that their O-line's really struggling. I know they're super banged up on the left side right now.
Yeah.
What have you seen from Wallace and Robinson, and what is the status of this Patriot offensive line coming into week 4?
Those two kids are young. They're really young,
Yeah.
and they saw stuff. I was talking to someone the other day that, they saw stuff in that Jets game they've never seen before, college, pro, whatever. And so they're going to have to get right relatively quickly. But the feeling is that those two guys are going to be contributors by the midway point of the season. They're going to be able to hold up against pressure round about the midway point of the season. You know what you have in Michael Onwenu, right tackle, another one of those guys they signed in the offseason. Sturdy presence, can play guard and tackle, just as dependable as you want. David Andrews, classic center, pros pro. Michael Jordan, a kid who they picked up off the scrap heap this offseason, has done well at the guard position. I mean, he hasn't blown anybody away. He's not going to make the Pro Bowl, but I think he's proven himself to be a good piece. Those two kids are just really young. And look, as we sit here on September 25th, they're not settled on a left tackle yet, which tells you everything you need to know about this roster. I mean, they had Wallace in there against the Jets, and that was only because Vidarian Lowe had a knee injury. And look, let's be honest, Vidarian Lowe is a journeyman. And the only reason Vidarian Lowe was in there because Chuks Okorafor, the guy they picked up in the offseason as a free agent from the Steelers, left a couple of weeks ago, like a week, 10 days ago, just left the team. And it's just like, I'm done with this. I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. So they don't have a left tackle. And that's where it all kind of starts. If they could find a left tackle through, the bargain basement guys that they have on the roster, or free agency, or whatever next year, the draft, then you can start to see things kind of slot into place. But those youngsters, they're youngsters. They're young, and they don't know what they don't know yet. They're getting a trial by fire here. And I think Jacoby Brissett is the one who's ultimately paying the prices here.
The attraction of Mayo, I'm sure, was the continuity. I mean, this is Bill's secondary. You look at these names: Jonathan Jones, Duggar, Peppers, Christian Gonzalez, their first-round pick last year. I love Marcus Jones, the little nickelback. He's a talented player. I mean, Bill's the greatest secondary coach of all time. He left kind of this secondary for Mayo. But what about the rest of the defense? I know Keon White is a player that I really liked at Georgia Tech. That was a great pick. And those two linebackers in the middle, McMillan and is it Tavai? Those guys both had big tackle numbers against the Jets. Tell us a little bit about this 3-4 front.
It's a good defense. It is. It's a good defense. It's a competitive defense now with the loss of Barmore, Judon. You don't really know, in Bentley now as well, the other linebacker, they have no margin for error when it comes to health the rest of the way. But I think this defense can keep them competitive. This defense can keep them in games if they play good complementary football, if they get a good performance out of special teams, if they can get some sort of semblance of offense, particularly in the passing game. The defense is good enough and has enough playmakers where they can kind of, keep things manageable for them. I really like Tavai. Tavai is one of the more underrated guys. Keon White is just proving to be, Keon White is the guy. Keon White's emergence was one of the reasons why they felt comfortable trading Judon. He's not exactly a 1-for-1 swap, but he does an awful lot of the same things. And look, if he can get home in 4, they're in really good shape. There's like 3 guys on this defense who are real difference makers, in my opinion. It's Keon White, his ability to collapse the pocket either from the inside or the outside, and get real good sustained pressure on the quarterback. Devon Godshaw, really good run stuffer in the middle, and then Christian Gonzalez. And Christian Gonzalez has done a relatively good job, not a great job, but a good job over the course of the first 3 games against opposing teams' #1 wide receivers. If those 3 guys can play consistently and be leaders and just do everything that's asked of them, this defense can be competitive. And I think it's going to be competitive on Sunday against the 49ers if those 3 guys can do their jobs.
Christopher Price with us from the Globe, and he also hosts the Believe Network Patriots show. And welcome to Niners Nightly as we break down Niners Patriots. A couple last ones before we let you go. The Niners are getting beat, Christopher, by these verticals. I mean, 2 weeks in a row. 2 weeks ago was Jefferson. This last week, they got burned up top left and right. They had 3 penalties. There was one that was overthrown. One went for a 50-yard bomb to Tutu Atwell. I know the Patriots go with Hooper and Henry. They got 2 pretty good tight ends. Hooper's from here, actually. He went to De La Salle High School, just a block away from where I'm sitting. How much do you think the Pats go 2 tight ends on Sunday? And do they have a deep threat? I know Douglas is a good young receiver, but who's their vertical threat? I got to think they're going to watch this Niner film and say, you know what? We have to take some vertical shots against this relatively slow secondary. Who do you think they'll be going down the field to?
Well, first of all, I'll see your 2 tight ends and I'll raise you another one here. I think that they're going to try and play 3 tight ends an awful lot just to try and help out those tackles. You know, whether it's Zach Thomas, not that Zach Thomas, but the journeyman offensive lineman Zach Thomas, working in a jumbo package. Caden Wallace did an awful lot of that before he had to come off the bench and play left tackle. They've really liked doing that, especially in the run game over the first 3 weeks to kind of clear a path for Stevenson. But yeah, they're going to go heavy an awful lot. They're going to do everything they can try and do to protect Jacoby Brissett. Their vertical threat is not so much Pop Douglas. Pop Douglas is more of a kind of a, if everything works out for Pop Douglas, he's a dollar store general version of Tyreek Hill. But the guy who, you know, they're 2 guys who I think have shown an ability to go deep, and that's Tyquan Thornton and Jalen Polk, 2 young wide receivers. They haven't made much of an impact in the passing game, but those are the 2 home run hitters in this offense as it exists right now. Polk had a really good summer, had a touchdown catch. I think it was against Seattle, if memory serves. He showed a nice connection with both Brissett and May. And then Thornton, the 3rd-year wide receiver out of Baylor, great speed, fantastic straight line speed, really good at drawing defensive pass interference for what it's worth. That's something to look for on Sunday. But those are the 2 guys. If the Patriots are going to try and air it out, those are the 2 guys I think they're going to look for.
And what is the mindset with May? I mean, and what did you think of him watching him in the preseason? He didn't play in week 1. He didn't play in week 2. He only played in the week 3 after the Jets put that game on ice. Is it one of those things where if the game gets out of hand, that's when we'll see Drake May? And what did you think of him from the glimpses that you got this summer?
In a vacuum, just completely, just if you stacked one against the other over the course of the summer, he outplayed Jacoby Brissett.
Really?
He did. He outplayed Jacoby Brissett. Now, the problem here, if you're the Patriots, they do not have the necessary infrastructure in place to support a rookie quarterback in the manner in which he should be supported. Particularly the offensive line, as we said. They just, if you put him out there now, and we saw a little bit of it Thursday night, he's going to get sawed in half. He doesn't know what he doesn't know yet. And so I think Elliott in particular, who comes from a family where, you know, they perfected the art of knowing when to put the quarterback out there as opposed to kind of holding him back, they're comfortable with Jacoby as we sit here right now in late September. Now, I think what you need, I think Drake May is going to be the starter for this team before the end of the season. What you need is to build confidence. You need to put him in some winnable situations. You need to put him in winnable drives, games, whatever the case may be, because when you put him out there, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube where you get a Zach Wilson kind of situation. You have to be damn sure that this is your guy. This is the moment for your guy. And so I think they're going to wait as long as possible. Again, like I said before, the expectations for this team are down here. If the expectations were like a 9-10 win team, maybe they're making that switch a little bit earlier. You know, I don't want to say they hit the panic button, but maybe they're doing it sooner rather than later. If this team wins 6 games, I'll say this: if this team wins 7 games this year, they should throw them a duck boat parade. That's the honest truth. And I think they would love to win 7 games this year with Jacoby Brissett as their starter, and then go into 2025 making those additions, whether it's in free agency, the draft, offensive tackle, wide receiver, and then you have Drake May under center, and you move from there.
I enjoy, when I was in Boston, I loved the duck boat and we went in the back bay, and it was beautiful. I mean, Boston. Last time I was there was in September, Boston in September, the weather is absolutely fantastic. All right, it's the ex dynasty Patriots against the ex dynasty 49ers. Both teams 1-2. Niners are 10-point favorites. I can't give 10 with the 49ers the way they're playing right now. No. What do you think? Give me a prediction on the final score Sunday.
I think San Francisco wins this thing. Again, I think New England keeps it competitive. Look, if this thing gets into the upper 20s, New England has no shot. This is not a team that's built to outscore other teams. They have to keep it in the teens, maybe low 20s. They have to put together some long, sustained drives. You're going to have to get a steady dose of Ramondre Stevenson, 20, 25 carries, and just take the air out of the place, and just win this thing. If you're the Patriots, win it like 17-13. I don't think right now that they have enough firepower to do that on offense. I think that defense are going to be able to be competitive. I'm with you. I think 10 points is a lot of points when you talk about these two teams. I think San Francisco wins this thing outright, but they don't cover. I'm going to say, let's say 24-20, something like that. Maybe the Patriots do surprise. Look, if the Patriots are going to win this thing, they're going to need to get some, like they did in Cincinnati. They're going to need to get special teams magic. They're going to need to get a turnover. They're going to need to get a thunderbolt. And I don't know if they're quite capable of kind of finding that gear, at least as currently constituted, particularly on the offensive side of the ball.
I think that they need to do what the Rams did last week, and that's fake a punt, steal a possession. Definitely steal a possession. Yeah. It's a steal a possession kind of a matchup once again for New England. Christopher, tell people.
And then the other thing too, honestly, we talk about special teams. Patriots have one of the best punchers in the league in Bryce Behringer. And look, we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel here in terms of analysis. We're going to punting, but you talk about it being a steal a possession game. The Patriots for so many years. One of the great things about that dynasty, one of the Belichick dynasties, they won so many games in the margins because of their play on special teams. They, a big part of that win in the opener was because of their special teams unit. If they get some standout special teams play, great return with Marcus Jones, block punt, field goals, whatever the case may be, they have a shot at this thing. But yeah, I just wanted to mention, if it's a steal possession game, the Patriots are probably feeling okay about their chances.
You can follow Christopher on X at CPriceGlobe, at CPriceGlobe. Christopher, tell people where they can catch you outside of X, and when do you, obviously you've got the podcast on the Believe Network. Tell people about, what you talk about and where they can catch it and when they can catch it live.
Well, you can check out all my stuff at Boston Globe and bostonglobe.com. Like you said, I'm also on X at CPriceGlobe. That's CPriceGlobe. And then I host the Patriots Report with former Patriots wide receiver Chris Hogan, who is absolutely dynamite. We record it every week. We just cut another one yesterday. As I'm looking at the calendar here, the latest episode is up. We look back at the Jets game, and then we look ahead to this 49ers team. So it's going to be an interesting game. I have a lot of fun talking about the Patriots with Hogan, a lot of fun writing. And so, follow along if you're a Pats fan or just an NFL fan in general.
Chris Hogan, if you're a Niner fan, you say, that name sounds so familiar. He actually was in training camp with the 49ers well before he ever made it to New England, but man, he really busted out there in New England.
Oh, he's a perfect fit. He's a perfect fit and a great guy too. Great podcast partner.
No question. A lot of Niner fans remember him. Tell him hi for all of us. And Christopher, thanks for the time. We really appreciate it. And thanks for stopping by on Niners Nightly on KMBR.
My pleasure, Larry. Take care.
There you go. Christopher Price. Fantastic. Really good stuff there. 49er Red Sox is great interview, Krug. Yeah, he was really, really good. And we really appreciate his time, and check him out on the Believe Network. All right, let's talk. I'm going to take a 30-second break for a little pull of water, and then we're going to come back, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Brandon Ayuk, because is Ayuk unfairly maligned, or is he not playing well? Is he playing well? And they're just not getting him the ball. What exactly is going on with Brandon Ayuk, and what's his impact on the Niner offense thus far? We'll look at some of the numbers. We'll take a deep dive into it. If you have a comment, and then we'll get into what the Niners issues are before we get out of here on Niners Nightly, a Wednesday night edition of Niners Nightly on the Sports Leader. All right, we're back with you on Niners Nightly on a Wednesday night, and thanks to Christopher Price for joining us and giving us a little thumbnail sketch on the Pats. Now, tomorrow night, this show's on the radio. That's right, because Giants baseball in the daytime, we'll have this one on the radio tomorrow night, the only night this week that we're on the radio. So join us tomorrow night at 6 p.m. on 680 and of course, 104.5 FM. And tomorrow night at 6:30, the great Andy Gresh is going to be in the house. Gresh and I are old buddies going back to when we worked on Mad Dog Radio together on Sirius XM. I had the late night, the overnight show. Gresh had the nighttime show. He was doing it back east. I was doing it from California. Anyway, we became good friends, and He's had a show on EEI with Christian Fourier, and he's bounced around in a number of different spots out in Boston now. Of course, you can catch him on CBS Sports Radio. He's done a great job for them. So he'll join us tomorrow night. We'll talk Patriots with one of the most knowledgeable Patriots guys there is, the great Andy Gresh. He's also a hell of a talk show host. All right, let's get into Ayuk for a second, because as I said, we talked about this a little bit off the start. There's like some contradiction in stats. Kyle Shanahan was asked today, and Brandon Ayuk was asked today about the stat that shows that he has the number one separation win rate in the NFL among wide receivers, 46.9. And it was for his game last week against the Rams in week 3 that he had that. And that was the highest separation win rate of any receiver in any individual game this year. But they threw him 10 balls and he caught 5. And he didn't have that kind of big of an impact on the game. And if you look at what he's done for the 49ers this year, it's not very much. He's averaging, what is he averaging? 39, something like 39 yards a game, I think is what he's averaging. 39 yards a game from Ayuk, and no touchdowns so far. So that's one stat. The other stat is he's, as far as number one, in wide receiver separation stat, his separation per target is 3rd worst in the NFL. So when Purdy has targeted Ayuk this year, he's got the 3rd worst separation of any receiver in the game. And he also got more separation in this last game against the Rams than any receiver has gotten in any game this year. And yet he only caught 5 balls and didn't get in the end zone. So what is it? Is he playing well and they're just not finding him, or is he not playing well? And I think if you look closer at the numbers, you'll see that Brandon Ayuk is hurting the 49ers offense thus far. Last year, he was a 2nd-team All-Pro. Last year, he was targeted 105 times. He caught 75 balls, 1,342 yards, 17.9 yards per catch, 7 touchdowns. Now he's in year 5. The one thing I always loved about Ayuk is he seems to get better every year until this year. The other thing I love about him is he's a good route runner and he's a willing blocker. So when you're a willing blocker, you're a good fit for this offense. When you get better every year, that shows that you're a diligent hard worker. When you're a good route runner, that means that you put in the time and it's important to you. So there's a lot of good traits about Brandon Ayuk. Then you mix in the fact that he's 26. He's got really long arms. He plays much bigger than his size. He's incredibly durable. And you see why the Niners gave him $76 million guaranteed. But he skipped training camp, and he's got 2.9 yards per target right now. Separation. 2.9 yards of separation per target. That's the 2nd worst separation per target in the NFL. He skipped training camp. He looks out of shape. He doesn't look like the same guy from last year. He doesn't have the same speed. He doesn't have the same explosiveness. He doesn't have the same confidence. Brian, and don't listen to me, Brian Baldinger, who breaks his stuff down for a living on the NFL Network, says that Ayuk looks pedestrian. And that's what I would describe as well. It's not that he looks bad. He doesn't look bad. He's too good to look bad. But he just kind of looks pedestrian. He doesn't look like a $30 million a year receiver. He looks a little bit winded. He looks a little bit out of shape. He looks like he's lacks a little speed and explosiveness. And if you look at his PFF grade this year, it's 62.8. His PFF grade in 2023 was 92.3. It's almost 30 points lower than where it was a year ago. So, as I said, this year, if you look at his numbers this year, he has 20 targets through 3 games. Last year, he had 20 targets through 3 games. So, it's a good comparison. Let's look at last year compared to this year. This year, he's got 20 targets on the year, 11 receptions. Last year, he had 20 targets. He had 17 receptions. This year, he's got 119 yards receiving. Last year, he had 320 yards receiving. So we're talking about he's down over 200 yards from what he did a year ago. Last year, he was 10.8 yards per catch. or that last year, I should say, he was 15.8 yards per catch. This year, it's 10.8 yards per catch. Last year, in the first 3 games, he had scored a couple touchdowns. This year, he has none. So, and then the number that really reflects why he's hurting the Niners is the yak. The Niners last year were the 5th best yak team in the sport. They got all kinds of yards after the catch. This year, they're 2nd worst in the NFL. They went from 5th best to 2nd worst in yards after the catch. So if Baldy says he looks pedestrian, there you got it. You have it right there. That's what he's pointing to. 2nd worst in the NFL in yards after catch. Last year, he was 5th best. Or last year, the team was the 5th best. This year, they're 2nd worst. The team, not Ayuk. But where this really starts to show itself is when you say, well, I know there are people who will be like, well, Purdy's not getting him the ball. But look at Purdy's numbers. Purdy's playing awesome football right now. He's got a 74.1 quarterback rating. That's 4th best in the NFL. His completion percentage over expectation is number 1 in the NFL. Number 1 in the NFL. Completion percentage over expectation, which factors in your opponent. And those are good stats to look at, by the way, in the first month or 6 weeks, because the opponents matter, right? So this basically is a way to take the opponent out of the equation. So his completion percentage over expectation, best in the league. His yards per attempt, 2nd best in the league. Once again, the dink and dunk crowd, they were so wrong, it was ridiculous. This guy drives the ball down the field. Last year he did. He's doing it again this year. Passing yards in the NFL, he's 2nd in the league. Air yards per attempt is 9.5. That's 3rd best in the NFL. As far as passing touchdowns, he's 4th best in the NFL. He's completing 72% of his passes. It's not top 5, but it's 7th. It's not bad. So, I mean, QBR 4th, 2nd in passing yards, 2nd in yards per attempt, 1st in completion percentage over expectation, 3rd in air yards per attempt, 4th in passing touchdowns, 7th in completion. I mean, he's playing good football. He's playing really, really good football, and yet he's doing it with Ayuk just kind of a shell of what he was last year. So hopefully, I mean, I think Ayuk's going to shake off the rust and start to play like Brandon Ayuk. But I think it's really, really clear that when you look at the 49ers, they lack a lot offensively. Obviously, they missed CMC. And they missed Debo. And last week, they missed Kittle. But they also missed Brandon Ayuk. They missed the Brandon Ayuk that they had last year. And they don't have that player this year. So that really is abundantly clear. Now, does he get it back? Does he bounce back? Does he bounce back, quick? Or is it one of those things where it's like, he's just going to have a down year. He's kind of behind the 8 ball, and he didn't have camp, and he's kind of started slow, and now he's kind of playing catch up all year. Or does he get to week 5, week 6, and suddenly he starts to look like the Brandon Ayuk of a year ago? That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for with this 49er team. What does Ayuk look like later on this year? All right, a couple other things I want to get into as well. Now, one of them is, by the way, today, Juwan Jennings named FedEx Air and Ground Player of the Week for his performance, 11 catches for 175 and 3 touchdowns. An amazing performance last week from JJ. And it came out today. There is still no timeline for Ricky Pearsall, who was shot on August the 31st. By rule, he can be activated as soon as next week against the Cardinals. I don't expect that we will see him next week, but it sounds like he's ramping up, doing more football work, and is getting closer to, being a factor and being on the field. So the injuries today, by the way, Debo did not practice. He was out with the calf injury. Trent Williams didn't even show up today. He called in sick. So he obviously wasn't there at practice. Kittle's got a hamstring. He was limited. Hargrave's got the triceps. He's out and done for the year, most likely. Purdy was a full go, back at practice, and T. Winters with the ankle was out. So That's the health status. And Kyle was asked if CMC is going to be out all year, and he gave kind of an ominous answer, because it would have been great to hear, oh, no, he won't be out all year. And he's like, not that I know of, which could be interpreted a lot of different ways. He could really be saying, he could just be playing, willful ignorance there. And Christian I'll just say this. If you're flying from San Francisco to Germany to see a specialist, something tells me it's a career altering moment for him physically. So what does that mean? Does that mean that, and the other thing is, like, I've asked this question and I don't know the answer, but can you go into, if a guy's got acute Achilles tendonitis, is there an exploratory surgery that can be preventative, or do you just have to wait for that thing to rupture? It seems like they're trying to look at all their options, but this is what's so painful, is that he's their best player. He's their best offensive weapon. They just extended him. He's only 28. If he does blow his Achilles out, he's probably not just gone for this year. He's probably gone for next year too. Now, that's not for sure, but let's just say he comes back, he plays this year, which I would imagine he will. And let's just say he can play 4 or 5 games without rupturing it, but then he ruptures it. Well, if he ruptures that Achilles, 4 or 5 weeks into his season, and let's say he doesn't get out there until week 10, you're talking about probably missing the rest of this year for sure, and probably all of next year. So this is a very, very significant moment for the 49ers franchise, because obviously they paid a lot to get him, and he's a great player, and he means a lot to what they do. And right now, I mean, if you really think about the Niners situation, they are leaning on Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, 7th round pick, Jordan Mason, JP Mason, undrafted free agent, Juwan Jennings, 7th round pick. They're literally leaning on 2 7th round picks and a undrafted guy to lead them offensively. And they're hoping to go to the Super Bowl. Think about that for a second. They got to be the only team in the history of pro football that would lean on 3 guys that were taken in the 7th round or later. All right, let's get into, I did the deep dive on the Niners last night. I watched the all 22. I watched the condensed, a couple times the night before, but I watched the all 22 last night of Niners Rams. And tonight I'll get into, I'm going to stream with Paulie Mack at 7:15, but after that, around 8 o'clock, 8:30, I'll put in the Patriots stuff and start looking at the Patriots film. So we'll have more to say on them in the, tomorrow night on the show. But as far as the Niners issues, when I started going through and first I started ranking them, then I was like, you know what, I can't rank these issues. There's just too many of them. I've got 11 issues that they have. All right, let's go right down the list. This is in no particular order. Colton McKivitz is giving up way too many pressures. I mean, the Niner offensive line is struggling overall. There's not a lot of room to run. It seems like there was in week 1, but there hasn't been since. Brendel, I know, has struggled a little bit at center, but if the numbers show that Colton McKivitz is really struggling at right tackle, and this is a major one for Brock's confidence. This is his front side tackle. This is the rusher that's in his face that he can see beating Colton McKivitz. So it's not as bad as your blind side, because you don't see that guy coming and he's about to knock you onto the ground and separate you from the football. But in some ways, it's worse when your front side tackle is not standing up, because you see that pressure in your face and you start to feel it, and you start to kind of have, I'm sure, insecure feelings about how much time do I have to throw the ball, and can Colton stand up and pass pro? And I like Colton. I think he's a good guy. He's one of my favorite guys to talk to, but he is giving up too many pressures right now, and that has to end. And they have no other option. It's not like they can go to Jalen Moore, or they don't have another. They don't have a guy that they can plug in for Colton McKivitz that's better than Colton McKivitz. So that's a problem. They need him to step up and play better than he's playing. They have Chris Hubbard. They have Jalen Moore. They have other options, but they're not as good as Colton. So they got to have Colton step up. I think he gave up like 6 pressures in this last game. That's way too many. way too many. And he's giving up pressures left and right in all 3 games. So that's number one. I mean, I hate to point the finger right at him and only him, because it's a team game, and but the pressure, the stats on the pressures show that he's given up the most pressures of any 49er offensive lineman, and is the lowest graded PFF offensive lineman. So Colton's got to get it going. I think he will. He started slow last year. He gave up 3 sacks in week 1 to TJ Watt, and then really got it rolling late in the year and start playing some really good football. He's got to find that momentum that he had last year. And he's got to find it this week. That's number one. Number two, the Niners are not getting a lot of yak. They aren't getting the yak that they got in 2023. So why is that? And I think it's just because overall it's a combination of they lack speed at wide receiver. They're not getting a lot of separation as a team. I think those numbers are official. Purdy, quarterback does mean a lot to yak stats, but you got to have some separation. If there's limits to what the quarterback can do. Purdy's throwing the ball with tremendous accuracy. So he's doing his part for the receivers to get the yak. But if the DB's sitting right there off your shoulder, you're going to catch it and get tackled. And that's what's happening. The 49ers wide receivers are catching the ball, but they're not getting yards after the catch. So, somehow they've got to get a little bit better separation, better route running, better speed, maybe a little bit more element of surprise, a little bit more, there's other things that we could point to that get receivers open as far as route combinations and that kind of thing. But you got to make somehow, some way, these receivers have got to create a little bit more room for themselves. Otherwise, Brock's going to be forced to throw a lot more 50-50 balls, and the result's going to be more turnovers. It's as simple as that. So that's issue number two. I think issue number three is that Brandon Ayuk, as I just kind of laid it out there for you, is a hell of a player and is worth that money, but he hasn't been worth it this year. And he's not Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk 2024 is not the Brandon Ayuk from 2023. Not yet. Maybe he'll get there. He ain't there yet. Issue number four. Just a lot of injuries, and they're starting to mount. Debo, CMC, Kittle, Trent's not 100%. Purdy's now not 100%. Hargrave's done for the year. I mean, the injuries, especially on the offensive side, are crippling injuries. Major issue for the Niners. Brock Purdy's back, I thought potentially was an issue, but we'll have to say it's not an issue because he was a full go today at practice, and he moved well on the practice field. He looked good. He didn't look like he was in any pain. He moved like Brock always moves. So hopefully that's the back thing was just a 24-hour deal. The Niner D-line is not stopping the run or rushing the passer, and they lost Javon Hargrave, so that they lost an interior rusher of note. And that's a I was talking to Sam Aquanu in the locker room today, and he was telling me, man, you lose a guy like Hargrave, that really does change the way offensive lines will go about blocking this Niner defensive front. So that's a major loss. But the Niner defensive line, no matter who's in the game, those guys have to step up. They got to play better. They got to rush the passer. They got to be felt more in the interior. They got to put heat off the edge. I mean, they got to stop the run. I mean, they got to have better run fits. I mean, they just have to be better across the board. The Niners are used to a dominant defensive line. Their defensive line is nowhere close to dominant right now. Issue number 7, Devondre Campbell is getting absolutely targeted in pass coverage, and he's getting toasted. I think he's got 18 targets and like 16 receptions allowed. That's not enough resistance there. I mean, I don't know how many more weeks they can go with Devondre Campbell over Curtis Robinson if Devondre doesn't close down that space a whole lot better in pass coverage. He's got to get better. The Niner safeties have got to show that they can cover. We're seeing a lot of strong safety bodies and not a lot of free safeties, among the Niner safeties. Do they have a free safety on this team? Are they going to have to go to Renardo Green at free safety? I think it's pretty clear that you got to sit Isaac Yiadom for Renardo Green. We'll talk to Sorensen tomorrow about that. The Niners look like they lack speed in the secondary. They're getting killed on the verticals, and it's guys are just running right on by. It's not like it's incredible play design. No, just got, you don't, your DBs don't run well. And now they've put on film 2 weeks in a row verticals. 2 weeks ago, it was just Jefferson. This last game, they got vertical left and right. There was 2 penalties that were big penalties. There was a 50-yard bomb to Atwell. There was the Whittington where he toasted Mooney, but Stafford overthrew him. I mean, the Niners have got to get this part of their game dialed in, or they're not going to even beat the Patriots. Patriots have, they get a representative group of speed. They can throw it over the top. And then, Ronnie Bell, I mean, I hate to say it because I hate to point the finger at an individual, but Ronnie Bell, if he's going to play over Jacob Cowing and Terrace Marshall, he can't get faster by Sunday. But guess what? Ronnie Bell's got to catch the ball. I mean, if your name of your game is that you're not that fast, but you're and you're not that big, but man, you can sure catch it and you got great ball skills. Well, guess what? You got to do what you do. And what he does is run good routes and catch the ball. So if he's going to be on this roster, he better start doing that. Otherwise, it's time for Terrace Marshall off the practice squad, or maybe even Jacob Cowing. And then last but not least, I mean, Shanahan said it today. He feels bad for Brian Schneider, but he kind of called out Brian Schneider as well. The special teams breakdowns have become a constant theme for the 49ers, and it just has to end. It can't be a weekly thing where you get beat on special teams, or it's going to be a really, really long year. So anyway, today was interesting down at Ninerland because Ayuk was standing there at his locker and everybody's like, hey man, you're really getting great separation. The stats show that you're getting the best separation of any receiver in pro football. And he just stood there and was like, really? Like, I mean, if you had a guy who was doubting his own stats, that was Brandon Ayuk today. He was like, he had that look on his face like, the stats lie, because I'm not as good as I was last year, and I'm not going to stand here in front of a group of people with cameras and microphones in front of me and try to pretend that I'm as good or better than I was last year when I'm nowhere close to where I was last year. So I respect the hell out of him for kind of being faced with a stat that shows that he's doing a good job, and just kind of, he wasn't real excited about it because he knows stats lie, and you can use stats for anything, and that stat may not be revealing of a true of what we're seeing out there as the intellectual truth of his situation. So anyway, I thought that was interesting today. Well, all these people standing there going, hey man, you're separating better than anybody. And it's like all these writers were believing it, except Brandon didn't believe it. And he was like, and he didn't have anything to say about it because I don't think he believed it. Anyway, that's going to do it for us. Quick hour in the books. Tomorrow we're back at 6 o'clock, and join us. We'll be on the radio tomorrow. So I'll be down in Santa Clara. So tomorrow, the 49ers practice late, so we'll probably still be down there. We'll do the show from the studio down there. And Andy Gresh is going to join us, and we'll talk Patriots with Gresh, who has a lot of opinions, and I'm sure he'll share them with us tomorrow night. And that's going to do it. Tomorrow we'll talk to Sorensen. We'll talk to Forrester. We'll talk to Purdy. We'll do more stuff in the locker room. We'll go to practice. And then we'll also have Andy Gresh on Niners Nightly tomorrow night at 6:30. So join us tomorrow night at 6. Gresh is going to stop by at 6:30. That does it for us tonight. Join me in a few minutes. Bottom of the hour, I'm going to talk on the Krueger Show, do a live stream with the great Paulie Mack. And looking forward to that. And we'll talk a little bit about the matchup as well. So check me out on the Krueger Show, bottom of the hour with Paulie, and have a great night, everybody. Thanks for supporting the Niners Nightly Wednesday edition on KMBR's YouTube channel, and see you tomorrow night at 6. Peace.